And joining us this morning is Missouri gubernatorial candidate and Missouri State Senator Bill Eigel. How you doing this morning, Senator?
Oh, it's a great day. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. I appreciate your time. Now, for those that aren't familiar with you or your campaign or your working history, introduce yourself. Give us a little bit about your history and tell us why it is you're running for Missouri governor.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm kind of the anti-establishment candidate in this race. I started this process about 2 years ago, traveling around the state, talking to folks all over Missouri. And, really, and I've seen this during my time in the state Senate, we have seen a lot of people be frustrated that the big red Republican ideas are not getting done down there in Jefferson City, in spite of the fact that we have these huge supermajorities of Republicans. We occupy every statewide office, and yet when we see the big red ideas, the big red victories that we ought to be not even breaking a sweat to get, we can't seem to get them done. I mean, look at the failure to pass initiative petition reform at the end of this most recent session, and that really is kind of like Groundhog Day every year, where we can't seem to get these soft, go along, get along Republicans to do what they said they were going to do in campaign season. So as I've traveled around the state, I've met thousands of Republicans that are really looking for that disruptor of the status quo. They're frustrated, they're disappointed, they're angry, and they're wanting, just like Donald Trump is winning the country right now on this idea of being a disruptor in Washington, D.C., they're looking for that disruptor that's really going to get things rolling in Jefferson City as well. So if you look at my history prior to being in politics, I'm a military veteran. I'm an Air Force veteran. I'm part of 4 generations of my family to serve in the United States military. My father was a pilot for the Air Force back in the Vietnam War. My grandfather was a cook for the U.S. Army in World War II. And after I served in the Air Force with my wife, Amanda, my only son, Kevin, is one of the newest sailors in the United States Navy. So service has come pretty naturally to our family. And I'm thinking of this Missouri, and I think that we can get to a Missouri that's going to be a real leader in these United States.
It's Missouri gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel here on NewsTalk KZRG. Bill Eigel, if elected, what would be your 3 primary goals as governor?
Well, top 3, there's a lot of big red things that we've got to get done. But if I had to pick the top 3, the first one that I think a lot of folks are talking about is my plan to get rid of personal property tax. Missouri is one of only a minority of states that still charges you rent for the crime of owning a car every December 1st. We have increased state spending and the tax burden in this state over the past 5 years dramatically. We've increased spending to the tune of $25 billion when personal property tax collectively only brings in about $1.7 billion. So we're going to get rid of personal property tax. That's going to be a big step forward for the state of Missouri when our working and middle-income class households no longer have to be punished going into the holiday season. And by the way, I'm the only candidate for governor that is proposing and supporting a plan to get rid of personal property tax. The second thing we're talking about is we're going to deport the illegal immigrants in our state. We're estimated to have about 70,000 illegal immigrants in the state of Missouri right now. And on the first day that I'm in office, I'm going to declare an invasion under Article 4 of the Constitution of Missouri, and we're going to authorize our National Guard, the Highway Patrol, and every sheriff in the state to start detaining and deporting every single one of those illegal immigrants who are in the state of Missouri illegally. And then finally, we're going to reform all the broken government down in Jefferson City. I'm the one that's talking about dismantling one of Missouri's worst bureaucracies. That's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We're going to go in there with a chainsaw, and we're going to cut out the waste in government and really free up our local school districts to start teaching kids reading, writing, arithmetic instead of this nonsense that's being forced down from the federal government.
Missouri gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel, you said something pretty interesting there about your stance on cutting personal property tax within the Show Me State. Now, presumably, with that loss of revenue to the state, budget cuts would need to be made as a result to some of that. Where do you foresee in the Missouri budget, if elected governor, you feel that we should be making budget cuts, and if elected, that you would be pushing for budget cuts?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a department in Jefferson City that doesn't need a reduction in size. I mean, if you look at, I mentioned the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. This used to be an organization that was made up of about a half a dozen folks whose only job was to write checks to local school districts, and now there's more than 1,800 employees that work out of that division. And the dirty little secret in Jefferson City is that most of the senators, and actually not most, all of the senators and all of the reps that are voting for the budget bills that are funding these bureaucracies have no idea what those funds are being used for. Our Medicaid program was found to have more than $1 billion of waste in a third-party audit. We've done nothing to address that. We can right-size our state workforce. We have a state workforce of about 55,000 people. Most states our size have a state workforce that's less than half of that. And here's what will really drive you nuts. Of that 55,000 person state workforce, 5,000 to 7,000 of those positions are empty at any given time, and we're paying for them anyway. So really the question is not where can we cut. The question is really where won't we cut? The government has doubled in size just in the past 5 years. You know, Governor Parson, Governor Kehoe have grown government more in their 6 years of being in the top two positions in Jefferson City than every Democratic governor combined going back to the founding of the state. That's not what Republicans signed up for back in campaign season. So we've got a lot of work to do, and I think that if we could just make good on the promises of efficient and smaller government, we can be a leader in this country.
And Bill Eigel, who's running for Missouri governor here at NewsTalk KZRG, you know, an issue that is kind of a perpetual issue when it comes to Missouri. It is rural areas, rural cities, smaller townships. Too often do they get lost and forgotten in the shuffle. And if elected to governor, Bill Eigel, what will you do to work with rural communities in the state of Missouri to drive more opportunities for them and ensure their voices are heard?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the policies that are good for our urban and suburban areas are the same policies that are good for our rural communities. We talk about getting rid of personal property tax. Yes, for most folks, they're thinking of the vehicle, the car that they drive to work every day, and we're not going to have to pay rent on that vehicle anymore. But in our rural communities, farmers are having to pay personal property tax on their tractors, on their farm equipment, on their cattle, for crying out loud. So it's the same policies, and there's a very much a temptation to say, what are we going to do for one group of people versus another group of people? But the reality is all of the policies that I'm talking about are good for everybody in the state, in particular our rural areas. Look at if we start detaining and deporting the illegal immigrants in the state, that's good for every county in the state because it's placing a burden. The presence of those illegals is placing a huge burden on the local counties, and quite frankly, in many of our rural communities, they have less ability to deal with the kind of waste that's brought as a result of having all these illegals. And what about DESE? Sometimes, I think very often, the biggest employer in our local rural communities oftentimes is the public schools. So by getting rid of DESE and getting those public schools out from underneath the local, the tyranny of Jefferson City, that's great for our local community. So everything in my platform is designed to benefit every one of the folks here in the state of Missouri. And by the way, beyond even the primary, there are also ideas that are not just good for Republicans, but they're good for independents and Democrats as well.
Missouri gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel, we're pushing up against the clock here, but if you had one final elevator pitch as to why Missourians should vote Bill Eigel for governor, what would that elevator pitch be?
Well, I would just ask very simply, if you're happy with the place that Missouri is at right now, if you believe that Missouri is doing well relative to other states, if you think that Missouri is growing and you're happy with the status quo, then there's a couple establishment candidates in this race that I think would make a lot of sense for your vote. But if you're looking for a Missouri that's going to lead this country, if you want those other big red governors to be turning on their TVs in the morning and saying, how can we be more like the Show Me State? Because we're doing the big revolutionary ideas like getting rid of personal property tax, deporting the illegals in the state, then I would ask for your vote because I think we need a disruptor of all that status quo down in Jefferson City.
And Bill Eigel for Missouri governor, for those that want to learn more about your campaign or about your working history, where do they go?
Sure. Take a look at BillEigel.com. We've had almost 40,000 individuals sign up to be a part of our campaign. As I've put more than 70,000 miles on my truck over the past year and a half talking to folks from around the state. But check out BillEigel.com. You can see my plank of ideas. You can sign up to volunteer and be a part of the campaign. Let's go, Missouri.
It's Missouri gubernatorial candidate Bill Eigel here on NewsTalk KZRG. Bill, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.